Welcome to segment 10 of System Syncing Certification Program. And this week, I'm going to go ahead and talk about virtual systemic inquiry. In terms of miscellaneous updates, there's probably only a couple today. Then I'll go through some general thoughts about the sequence that you were reviewing for last week. And then Susan Gibson will join us at 10:30 for a discussion about her work, her employing systems thinking in the agile coaching and facilitating that she does with organizations on an ongoing basis, and then followed by a short Q&A session. In terms of miscellaneous updates, things have been relatively steady, which I guess is a good thing. The change that happened last weekend was we went ahead and implemented the new color scheme for the map that Jeff Moore, one of the Kumu developers, put together, because he sort of said that I didn't have any talent in the area of color schemes and things, so he worked up this, and I think it's pretty nice. It's better than the one that I had put together. So nothing actually changed. I mean, all the content remains the same. It's just it looks slightly different. And the other thing, there were a couple of comments in the newsletter on Sunday about discussions. Note that you really shouldn't start a new discussion unless it's something that you really want everyone to get a copy of, because once you initiate the discussion, it goes to everyone who has access to this set of content. And for as long as you are reviewing a particular segment, you want to go ahead and follow the appropriate discussion during the time that you're working that segment, so that if you haven't already signed up for it, when the discussion was started, you got a copy of it, but that didn't mean that you're actually following the discussion. You need to go here and say, follow this discussion, which you will then, anybody that makes posts to it, you'll get copies of the posts, and everyone who is participating gets to see your post also. And then once you finish that segment, if you don't want any more of the posts relating to that particular segment, simply go back to the discussion and tell it to mute that discussion so that you won't get any more of the traffic for it. The one thing that I have the developers looking into at the moment is a way for someone to simply opt out of all of the discussion traffic whatsoever. I had indicated that you have access to this content even after you've finished the program, and it probably gets to a point where you don't want the weekly updates about the program status or any of the rest of the traffic if someone initiates a new discussion, and there probably should be a way for someone to just opt out of the discussions altogether. So they're looking into that. And that's it for the miscellaneous updates. As to the content for this week, the topic is virtual systemic inquiry, which actually arose from a question posed shortly after we initiated the Systems Thinking World discussion group on LinkedIn about 4.5 years ago, and that was, with this assemblance of resources that have come together on Systems Thinking World, suppose we actually want for a group of people to get something done. How do we go about doing that? Being that, I mean, if someone wants to get something done in this day and age, typically whatever it is that we're looking at is extremely complex and generally perceived as being complicated. So does any one person know enough to address that situation? And the answer is, in almost all instances, no. So that to do any sort of appropriate approach to understanding and dealing with a situation, collaboration is essential. Now the question is, who are the appropriate people that should collaborate, that are the appropriate people to add to the puzzle, And once you identify them, it's highly likely that they are geographically distributed in something less than 25 time zones. And once you identify the right people, if they are the right people, you can sort of predict that they're already amazingly busy. I mean, can you imagine that you're looking for a person to contribute to solving this complex problem and they're just sitting around waiting for you to find them? That's not very likely. And because they're extremely busy, trying to schedule anything in terms of working together collectively in terms of meetings the way that we always have in the past is probably next to impossible. Trying to schedule a half a dozen people in 5 different time zones who are already extremely busy is just doesn't work. And you know, we used to do things with the gerbil trail. We used to send things from one person to another to another to another, and that also doesn't work because somebody has to merge all this stuff together, and everybody isn't aware of all of the other contributions, and it's just the question is how do you bring a group of people together to work on something and not have it end up with success being highly unlikely. So the realization was that the task at hand is complex and complicated, and it overwhelms the typical methods that we have used in the past. So that based upon the nature of collaboration, we need an integrated tool set that allows us that enables us to work together in a meaningful manner over time. And though the integrated tool set itself is not enough in that it requires an integrated mindset, a shared vision of what it is that we are collectively trying to accomplish. And so the first test of this was actually figuring out how to, in other words, we sort of bootstrapped the whole thing in trying to use what we thought we understood about doing virtual systemic inquiry to figure out how to do virtual systemic inquiry, which is enough to give anybody a headache, and it gave us a headache for quite some time. So that we were looking for a set of tools that would enable us to do the kinds of things that we thought we needed to do. And the requirements for them that we came up with was, because of the distributed nature of people, the stuff needed to be web-based as opposed to things that ran on people's desktops. And whatever the tools were, it had to be able to track changes so that we could back up things to find out how we got to this point if we needed to. And it had to support simultaneous multi-user in terms of if you have a distributed group of people who are working on things asynchronously, means you could have 2 or 3 people working on something at the same time. Whatever the tools are have to allow multiple people to work on the same thing at the same time. So we ended up realizing that there's a place for discussion forums, but discussion forums are not the answer. I mean, if you participate in Systems Thinking World or any of the other discussion groups on LinkedIn, there is a place for them, though there is a limited utility of them. They have a tendency to just diverge over time. It's like trying to herd cats in terms of trying to keep anything focused. So that you can use a discussion environment to gather a lot of different perspectives, though you have to sort them out and integrate them into some meaningful relationship between all of those components. Otherwise, you end up with more confusion than you started with. So some sort of mind mapping that allows one to integrate the different perspectives together. And I'll talk about specific tools that we've identified to do this with. At the time that we initially we're developing this concept in conjunction with the LinkedIn discussion group. We were using a wiki because it was one that allowed for this set of core requirements, a place where you could capture textual content along with integrated graphics. And someplace for typical Office documents, though to what extent depends upon what it is you're investigating and the kinds of data that you're trying to keep track of. While the participants are operating asynchronously, any 2 or 3 of them might want to connect on a moment's notice to talk about something in particular that two or three of them are trying to figure out, yet not something that works, that's billed as a typical kind of a big old meeting where everybody has to get together. It's a conversation between a couple of people that's beneficial as opposed to sending mail messages back and forth. And then in terms of, in conjunction with mind mapping, often it's appropriate to develop some kind of a relationship map to provide a better understanding of the components and their interactions. So rich pictures and causal loop diagrams and simulations. I mean, I am talking about virtual systemic inquiry as opposed to just virtual inquiry, so that the systems aspect of it was considered appropriate. And then at times there's a need for charts, flow charts, or wireframe kinds of diagrams and a charting capability. So this is what we came up with, is a set of requirements for tools, not believing that this was exhaustive, though this sort of filled the bill for 90-some% of the things that we envisioned as requirements. So then we went out looking for tools that actually fit the bill, that would allow a set of collaborators. And the 2 products that we found that would allow us to do the equivalent of mind maps in a web-based environment, which were extremely robust, were DebateGraph and Kumu. And the nice thing about, and we also think that the utilities which have a free dimension to them are real good to work with, because they sort of tear down the barriers to entry. And if you have a number of people who are going to work on a project for a short period of time, a high cost for them to work on a project for a couple of weeks and then exit is just might be restrictive to actually getting the project done. So we also looked for projects or for tools which could be used to some extent for free. And Prezi is also one of those for developing presentations. And Prezi and Kumu both have the same usage model, in that you can develop all of the public content that you want for free, and if you want to develop private content, then you have to pay for it, which seems to be a sensible model. Insight Maker, which is sufficient in most instances for doing rich pictures and causal loop diagrams and stock and flow simulation models, and it's also free. LinkedIn is not the best discussion platform in the world, though it does happen to be a place where there seems to be the largest collection of professional people who are likely to be contributing to the kinds of projects that we had in mind. MediaWiki, the wiki itself being an environment that allows for multiple people to develop the content and keep track of the historical versions, and it's essentially free, depending upon where you put it up. Skype and Gmail. Again, Insight Maker for causal loop diagrams. Google Docs in terms of doing Word kind of documents and spreadsheets, drawings, and presentations, and they're all multi-user and free. An Insight Maker for simulations. And then Lucidchart and Cuckoo are two web-based charting packages that we identified. So this is a set of tools that we identified, not that any particular project might require all of them, though in a particular instance, these are the ones that we identified that we felt might be likely to provide the right utility, depending upon what it was that we were developing. And then in terms of integrating the interactions, we realized that with all of these different people interacting, some of them for short periods of time, some of them for longer periods of time, and in an asynchronous manner, from the outside it looks like, think of the Peanuts character, Pigpen, and his blanket, and the cloud of dust that is around him on an ongoing basis, that from the outside the project probably looks like that level of chaos on an ongoing basis. And to the people involved in it, it might look like that from time to time also. So that we needed to start with a point of focus, someplace that everyone could remember that whatever is part of this project, whatever the current status of the project is, you can go to this focus page and it tells you where all of the other pieces are and what has transpired recently. So that we thought of using a wiki to do that, and then from the wiki to go ahead and initiate a discussion, and the wiki links to the discussion and the discussion links back to the wiki, so that the two of them are tied together. And as the discussion is unfolding, you develop a concept map which has a link in the focus page and a link from the discussion to the concept map back. And the discussions, the concept map evolves and people carry on the discussion, and from the discussion it continually adds to and evolves the concept map. And maybe it develops into a formal model. It depends upon the project, what you're trying to figure out, what the questions are. Sometimes you need a concept map, sometimes you need a causal loop, rich picture, a causal loop diagram, and sometimes you actually need a simulation model, depending upon the questions that you ask and what you're trying to understand. Though now that we have continued to evolve this with the advent of Kumu, we've been able, for the most part, to drop the wiki out of the picture and actually conduct the discussions and the development of the concept map and possibly the causal loop diagrams in Kumu without having to go anyplace else. And there are a couple of current projects underway that there are a couple of 2 to 4 people in each one of the projects, and the whole thing is happening within Kumu, and we're not using anything else at the moment. So in terms of, I mean, this has been evolving over the past 4 years, in that systems thinking world was essentially one of these case studies, even though we didn't understand it. And so that the virtual systemic inquiry sort of project evolved out of that, and we bootstrapped the understanding. And then there was a project to develop a better understanding of power grid systems and hypertension intervention and PSA tests, and a sustainable business forum that was done, the Systems Thinking World Journal, which is sort of in hibernation at the moment, I think. And then last year, Scott Fort Monroe and I undertook a project to write a book called Beyond Connecting the Dots with 400 participants. And people told us that we were absolutely nuts. And it actually turned out marvelously. The work, the ebook, turned out far better with those participants than it ever could have had the two of us simply wrote it alone. So I mean, you have to continue to stay focused on what it is that you're trying to accomplish and evolve the idea. The whole enabling a better tomorrow, which is one of the segments of the certification program, with two examples that, where was I? That approach is actually the result of a virtual systemic inquiry project undertaken by a group of people within the LinkedIn discussion group. And it's been developing over the last 2 years and is still, in sort of an ongoing evolutionary stage. And health and healthcare, which was undertaken primarily by Jeff McDonald in Sydney with some assistance by me, helping to understand how to use Kumu. The project is absolutely marvelous in terms of what he has figured out how to put together, but now has to figure out how to make it consumable, because it's currently not. I mean, the amount of content that he has amassed in a number of different domains regarding health and healthcare is just phenomenal, and all of these elements are models relating to health and healthcare in one manner or another, and it's just a fabulous amount of content. Though at the moment it's not too usable because we have to figure out how to get it into a form that's consumable. So that's sort of virtual systemic inquiry in a nutshell, in terms of the way that it has evolved over the past several years. I would say that the development of Insight Maker itself has been also a virtual systemic inquiry project, in that Scott Fort Monroe has been working on it for almost 5 years. I've been working with him for a little over 4.5 years, and I've never met him. And we use most all of the pieces that I talked about at one time or another. And the individuals who are using Insight Maker are continually asked for feedback or comments about different features and functions. And in 5 years, it now has just a little over 25,000 users. So, questions? I imagine it might be a bit of an overload, but that's the Federal Express version. Any comments? Questions? Susan, you may be on tap early. Are there any questions about any of the other sections that I can answer before we move forward? I mean, I sort of end up in a never land when the presentation doesn't generate a few questions. Everybody's napping, I guess. Well, in that case, then, Susan, are you there? Oh, Susan's napping too.
Nope, I'm here, Gene.
Susan Gibson is an agile coach and facilitator with over 30 years experience in the high-tech industry, consistently seeking ways to bring authenticity and compassion to software and product delivery. And for those of you who are not overly familiar with agile, maybe she could give us a few words about what agile is from her perspective. I think you now have control of my screen. This is the slide that you sent me, and the next tab up here is the other link that you asked to have available.
Okay. All right. Yes. Yeah, sure. I can absolutely start with agility. So I came into systems thinking from agility and learning that all the things that I've been doing and kind of implementing and thinking about over the past 10 years as an Agile coach and trainer is stemmed in systems thinking, and so it's really exciting for me to kind of discover this whole new world of things that I've already kind of been doing and thinking about and implementing in my daily work. And so one of the things about agility, I will just spend a couple of minutes talking about it. It's kind of a specific application of systems thinking. It's kind of taken pieces of the greater kind of academic study and tools and practices and applied it to a very specific domain around software and product development. And agility is growing outside of the bounds of product and software development, but it really grew out of a reaction to a traditional waterfall methodology around software development that does not necessarily serve us well in terms of nimbleness and ability to respond to changing market trends and taking care of people within the organization who develop our software and make sure that it's high quality and high technical excellence. So it kind of brings all of this together. Built into it are the feedback loops, shared vision, self-organizing teams, and kind of building this concept of a learning organization, which is kind of what I dedicate my work to in the enterprise, is coming into these very large companies and kind of instilling a culture of learning and being agile. The doing part of Agile is the list of practices and tools that support it, and there's a lot of ways that you can do Agile, but the being part is really when you get into that mental model shift and that mindset shift, and what does it mean to actually kind of embrace agility in everything that you do. And so kind of the bridge into this virtual systemic inquiry is one of the things I do is a certification class, a 2-day Agile certification class, and I'm delivering that online in August, and so that's my next experiment with agility and a piece of systems thinking to see how that's going to translate to the online classroom experience from a 2-day, like I say, 2-day classroom-based instructor-led certification program. And so another piece of work that I do is with systems thinking in action and collaborating with Sirajuddin as the kind of caretaker for STIA Plus conferences. And what you see displayed here is actually a design challenge that we're dealing with right now. We've had 2 physical conferences under the care of Siraj, one in DC in November and one in Seattle this April. And out of the Seattle conference, you said, wouldn't it be cool to do an online conference? And you know, there's lots of formats out there around online convening and things that we said, you know, let's kind of take what we've learned about with our physical conferences and apply that to the virtual world, and have a host assigned, Chris Clark, who's been leading this. So we kind of took that design. We took time to understand the time zones because we wanted this to have global reach, and so spent a lot of time saying, you know, if it's 11 a.m. in New York City, you know, what time is it in Tokyo, and will people want to attend the conference, you know, in the middle of the night in Tokyo? And so spent a lot of time around that, and took a lot of time to find and prep the speakers for the online experience, and said, you know, there's going to be a small contingent, in Seattle. That's where Chris Clark is, with the speakers and the volunteers. And what does that look like, you know, from an online conference point of view? and what's that experience, so kind of taking the translation from the physical into the virtual space. So we had all these pieces in place, and we spent a lot of time to select what's the right technology platform or that tool, right? And so we looked at a number of options and came up with Maestro as the delivery platform. And it's a complicated tool because of the nature of what it's trying to deliver upon, with the idea of in a conference, you want to have plenary sessions, you want to have breakout sessions, you want to have this seamless transition, from kind of one type of container space to another. And so after a couple of weeks of learning and trying to figure out the tool, we decided we actually need to hire a driver for the tool, and it's a service that Maestro provides to kind of take the burden off of the host and the volunteers, so that somebody who is well schooled in the tool, and Jean just went through kind of these tools can be very complex when you start talking about how to deal with this virtual world and discussion groups and community. And so we said, okay, so we're going to hire a driver. So feeling really confident, right? It's like, this is awesome. We've thought about all of these things, and we have no registrations. So it's like, okay, what's gone wrong, right? So we're taking a look at it. We've got all the pieces in place. We're feeling confident with what the design is. But all of our experience has been in the physical space. So what Chris Clark did is started to consult with some experts out there who have had successful online conference experiences. And so what you see displayed here are the challenges. I like his framing here, this design challenge, and the name of the conference is STIA Plus Now. And what he found is, what you've got to take a look at, and I'll make a connection to my agility world, is who your customer is, and start to create personas around who your customers are. And what he has kind of come up with is there's three kinds of motivations, and which leads to kind of three customers that we're trying to attract to this online conference. And it's the goal-oriented, goal-motivated people, relationship-motivated people, and learning-motivated people. And the bulk of the world is goal-motivated people, which tends to not be the systems thinking community. The systems thinking community actually starts from that learning-motivated group, and there's a number of us, myself included, in that relationship motivated, and then kind of moves to the goal motivated. So it kind of turned our mental model upside down, if you will, and said, okay, we've got to look at it from that goal point of view. So then once you start taking a look at what your personas are, the people, the customers you're trying to attract, how are we going to attract them, right? And so taking a look at what the online trends as far as convening and discussion and getting that experience, there's four key trends here. One is that the platform matters, and we see it in our world every day. There are people who love Facebook and don't really engage on LinkedIn. There are people who engage on LinkedIn and not on Facebook. Those are just two of the big examples. There's many, many other online platforms, but kind of figuring out what that platform and that method, that tool is incredibly important when it comes to the overall design. The other couple of pieces, and Jean touched on this as well, is the need for synchronous and asynchronous communication. Not everybody wants to engage in that synchronous communication. They want to have a chance to engage asynchronously. And so when you're looking at a conference design, you've got to build in space for that asynchronous conversation to occur. And we had not considered that. We had not done any of that. We had planned it as you would a physical conference, with just events and activities going one after the other. Allowing for an a la carte kind of point of view. So one of the things from a physical sense that we've been building with the STIA Plus conferences is asking people to participate in the full event. So if it's a 2 or 3 day event, it's a one price thing, all meals are included, you know, things like that. So people come, you kind of build that container in the physical sense, and they're part of that community throughout the 2 or 3 day event. Well, from an online perspective, that's actually very exhausting. It's exhausting from a physical perspective, but from an online perspective, it's exhausting because you're competing with people's kind of mental energy and capacity to stay engaged in this online sense when there's kind of no other stimuli coming in for them, or they're distracted about other things that are coming in, and so it becomes very mentally exhausting to ask people to stay engaged for the entire length of time. And so offering the a la carte, you know, I want to participate here, I don't want to participate there, have it be very fluid, is a piece of design, it's a piece of the design that we're taking into serious consideration, and it's a very different point of view from the physical sense. And then allow people to self-organize, and so this is a huge topic in agility, is self-organization. How it's manifested itself in the STIA Plus conferences is having a strong component of open space where people can either propose topics or engage in conversations about topics. They can float from topic to topic throughout the day. They can engage in conversations outside of the format of the conference entirely. And so having that ability in the online space, it goes beyond the facilitation of the tool that allows the breakouts to happen. What we're looking at is, say, if a group wants to organize, self-organize around a Google Hangout, kind of go for it and allow that to happen. And so all of these design considerations are now impacting what this conference is going to look like in August. And the chances are is that it's going to be over many, many days, offer many platforms to engage, offer a way for people to truly self-organize around the topics that they're interested in, and also engage in further conversation with the speakers that are lined up to present their work. It's also impacting the conversation and the interaction that the presenters will have, because it's opening up this kind of this state of this virtual state for them to be able to express how they fit into this motivation list and this online trend list, to say, well, I'm actually more comfortable presenting and facilitating in Insight, for instance, instead of the Maestro tool that we've chosen. And so it's completely opening it up for broad experimentation, but also kind of opening it up to listen to what the community wants, and designing the conference around what the community wants, instead of saying this is what we think it should be, and kind of pushing that out. Instead, opening it up for a pull from the community to lead to a design for this conference. So I'm going to pause there. That's my kind of 15 minutes about kind of the problem set I brought to you today. Are there any questions or comments? Jean, I don't know if you want to open it up at this time for that.
Yeah, that's fine. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and post them, and I'll go ahead and ask them of Susan. My comment is that this is exactly what I was talking about for the first 20 minutes, all right? Yeah. And that there are a number of people involved in trying to figure out how to go about doing this. I mean, there's a relatively well-defined intent with a lot of gray areas around the edges that need to be figured out. The individuals involved are involved at different extents. There are some people that are, I would say, that are part of the core group or focus group, and from what I recall, they're in several different time zones.
Yes.
And then there are, in addition to the people trying to figure out how to put it together, there are the people that need to participate at different levels, being the speakers for the primary set of speakers, and then the people that will be managing the discussion groups or the breakout sessions.
Yes.
All right, so there's all of these pieces to the puzzle that need to get figured out, and it's one of those ugly problems that just, you can't just get 4 or 5 people together in a big old meeting and figure out the answer, because it's just not that clear cut.
That's right, it's not. And the other piece of it, and can actually kind of show the website design. So one of the other things that we took a look at, and Chris spent a lot of time with a web designer for STIA Plus Temenos around there's something that was not appealing to people or engaging them from the website. And if you think about this kind of online presence, right, it starts with that kind of search or discovery to say what's out there. And so when you kind of direct people to this place, so kind of to find out more about the conference, if that's not an inviting or engaging experience, then you've kind of lost that opportunity to engage with them, but you don't have any way to know unless they start kind of engaging in that conversation, either through registration or through questions getting posed or some kind of interaction. You don't really know. And so kind of taking a really critical look at what the website design was, and starting to take these kind of motivations and online trends into account to say, okay, this is the first introduction that people will have. We need to appeal to these 3 personas, first of all, so that they can see themselves in that website design, to be able to even engage in the initial conversation around interest. And so that piece has just recently gone live, and it is just wildly different from what the rest of the look and feel of the website looks like, and we're really hoping that it's going to speak to people when they look at it. It actually, has this kind of, do I still control this? I can, yeah. It has this I, we, us. I'm scrolling slowly. Forgive me, my internet is, but this kind of outcomes-based point of view around I, we, and us that hopefully people will find appealing, whether they're goal-motivated, relationship-motivated, or learning-motivated, right? So it's a very different presentation of information that we've used for the physical conferences. Physical conferences, people want to know, where's it going to be, right? So I can start making my travel plans. Who's going to be there? And it takes on a form around kind of the logistics planning first. Well, first and second around, is it of interest to me, who are the speakers, and what are my logistics? In a virtual sense, they still want to know, I would imagine, who's going to be there, but the logistics part is not the initial focus, because you don't need to make hotel accommodations and travel arrangements and all of that, or look at the cost of logistics planning, right? All of that's gone away. So you've got to really look at it as that enticing from that individual motivation point of view. How is it speaking to me, right? And what am I going to get out of it? So we lead now with this outcomes point of view and hopefully that will engage. It's an experiment in the making. So we'll see how this turns out. But it really has kind of this virtual systemic inquiry is kind of dead center on this experiment that we're running in the moment.
Well, and not only that, I've been on my soapbox for 9 weeks now about trial and learning, so it fits right into that
awesome.
mode
Awesome.
also.
Another key piece around agility, the fail fast and develop and deliver in short increments of time, so you can get the feedback and adjust what's coming up next. So
are there any questions for Susan? Well, Edith posted a note and said she's not sleeping or not napping. So.
Thank
you. You sort of have to wonder when you cover a whole bunch of material and nobody asks questions. So either it was just or you completely missed them, or it's of no interest, or without feedback, what do you know?
Exactly.
Can you imagine going bowling blindfolded and nobody telling you how many pins you knocked down? It would not be very interesting. That's why I prefer sessions with lots of questions. So maybe I should make the session more confusing. And
maybe.
Yes. There's one point that I didn't mention that I should mention about virtual systemic inquiry, and that has to do with enabling generative interactions. And the question probably is, what does that mean? My comment about trial and learning is front and foremost, and that we have sort of tried to adopt that mindset from the beginning. And I showed you a set of case studies. Well, those are the case studies that had some level of success. There were probably twice as many of that were dismal failures. Though from every one of them we learned something. And participating in a project where there may only be one or two people that are part of that project from the beginning to the end, and people come and leave along the way depending upon what it is that they have to contribute to what you're trying to figure out at what stage in the evolution. It's extremely critical that there is a well-defined intent. I don't want to use the word goal, because it's, goal is more like there's a specific end result that you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes the intent is really to investigate multiple perspectives to gain a better understanding of something, which is sort of intangible and not like an achievable goal like getting to San Diego or something. So that a well-defined intent is essential so that everyone who participates at different points in time understands what the intent is, and then someone absolutely has to keep the effort focused on the intent. So that if you don't have the intent well defined, and when people come to participate, if they don't understand the intent, if they're doing something a week later that's not contributing, you can't use the intent to focus their effort because you don't have an intent. So, I mean, that's, and a number of the efforts that we undertook were essentially derailed from the outset because we had not developed a well-defined intent that we could share with other people. It was sort of trying to get a hold of air. It doesn't work too well. So the intent, all right, and then to maintain the focus and a sense of ownership in progress toward that intent. So I would add that. Edith says she appreciates the distinction among various motivations and how to make the venue engaging. It's yes, I was going to add something, but it would take too much to set the stage for it. So, any other questions? Looks like we may end a bit early today. So, thank you much. And if you have any other questions or questions after this, go ahead and post them to the discussion. And if I can't answer them, I'll forward them to Susan, and we'll see that you get a response. And thank you, Susan, very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jean.
Take care, all. Bye.
Bye.